Thank you, my registrar, ICSAN. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being with us on this program today. So without much ado, I'm going to start my presentation, and I do hope that everyone will gain something from this presentation. So just to also say that even though the registrar said, that we've been talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, and she thought we should have something new to talk about. The truth of the matter is that even the pandemic is a force majeure. My topic is actually managing border affairs in a force majeure period and the role of the company secretary. But the truth is that even the pandemic that we're going through now is actually a force majeure because nobody invented it. It's beyond human control, and so it was not anticipated. Neither was it designed to be like that. So, but I've broken down my paper into content, talking about introduction. I'm going to define some few terms. I'm going to just talk briefly about the role of the company secretary. We're talking about meetings, stakeholder communications, regulatory disclosures, compliance, and then some parting words, and then the sources that I have used. And so, like I said when I started the introduction, even a pandemic, it's a force majeure situation. We stood at the threshold of 2020 on 31st December 2019, and no one could have foreseen the situation in which we are now, or that actually came into effect by end of March 2020. And what happened was coronavirus. It first started with one person coming into Nigeria, an Italian. And prior to that, it was discovered in Wuhan, China in December 2019. But no one thought that it would have these far-reaching consequences that it has had. And no one definitely knew that it would bring the business world to a standstill, which was more or less what brought about the force majeure. As it developed in Nigeria, the government introduced some measures, like saying gatherings should not be more than 20 people. Initially it was 50, they cut it down to 20. And then came December 23, the borders were closed, the airports were shut, nobody could travel in, nobody could come out. And of course that affected supply chains of companies. It limited the ability of companies to import products, to go on with their contracts, to stock their shops, and so on. And then the federal government also imposed a lockdown order on 3 states, Lagos State, Ogun State, and the Federal Capital Territory, with effect from 30th of March. And also, so that meant that most of us, apart from those companies that were working in essential services, fast consumer goods companies, could not go to work. We started working from home with all its own challenges and everything. At that particular period, most companies, the banks at least, were getting ready to complete their 2019 audits because they have a deadline of April to submit their financial statements to the Central Bank of Nigeria. And so many other companies, most companies were working towards, the public companies were working towards submission of their Q1 accounts to SEC. And so everything just came to a standstill. more or less, and we couldn't go to work. It was a strange environment, and how were people going to cope with these challenges? So nobody knew even at that time that the lockdown was going to be for 2 months, literally 2 months, in which people were just at home and working, not going out. There was curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day. And most companies, their major concern were keeping their IT system, keeping their business going at whatever cost. And other issues now came into play. IT and cybersecurity, became the main focus, because some people were not even used to that. They did not even have robust IT systems to take them through. So against this background, how could companies continue to operate with an efficient and effective governance structure? Of course, the regulator stepped in to try and bridge the gap. In doing that, for example, the Securities and Exchange Commission extended the deadline for the submission of Q1 reports of public companies by 60 days. They also extended the submission of audited financial statements by 60 days. And of course, the CAC also stepped into the breach and issued the guidelines for holding annual general meetings by proxy, so that the regulatory environment will not break down and companies will still be able to comply with practices of good corporate governance. Next slide talks about definition of key terms that we have in the topic that we're looking at. Everybody is familiar with the board. The board has oversight function over management. The board strategizes. The board, they establish policies and take decisions on key issues. Then what is board affairs? What is that? Board affairs is really largely corporate governance. That's what the board stands for. The government, the management of the affairs of the company, the oversight over the board, the relationship with shareholders, with other stakeholders, and then force majeure. Even when I started, you would have gotten the definition of force majeure. An event that is as a result of nature, nobody anticipated it, it cannot be controlled. It could be a war, it could be a strike, it could be a pandemic as we have now, or extreme weather conditions where you have hurricanes, where you have tornadoes, and there's so much destruction that people cannot move around, cannot do their work. A natural hazard that is beyond human control. And so the company secretary, I don't need to go much into that. We're all company secretaries. We know that we're officers of our company, and we are mainly responsible for governance. So the role of company secretary, I will not dwell much on that. We are all aware of section 298 of CAMA that sets out our roles. We are expected to prepare for board meetings, convene the board meetings, attend the board meeting, render advice to our chairman, render advice to the board on applicable rules and regulations, prepare minutes, file statutory returns, and all that. We also know that in addition to what CAMA has, to section 298 of CAMA, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018 made the role more robust by saying, well, the company secretary needs to provide guidance to the board, coordinate the induction of and training of directors, compile board papers, assist the chairman and the MDC in coordinating the activities regarding the annual board plan, all those things. So it's a robust function, and it's things that we all do. There are roles that we all play in our day-to-day work in our offices. But in a force majeure period, these responsibilities become more and more important. And apart from that, the company secretary needs to be proactive in a force majeure in a force majeure situation. So while the management is focusing on stabilizing the business and mitigating the impact of the force majeure incident on the business and making sure that the company still remains profitable, the company secretary has to ensure that the board continues to meet its own legal obligations by, of overseeing and assessing the management activities and how they are responding to the force majeure incident that has happened. So the company secretary must ensure that the board meets not only in line with the schedule. I'm assuming that most companies, most of us have moved to the stage where we encourage our boards to set dates in advance for meetings for the year. And so we want to ensure that those meetings are held as scheduled. But more so in this time, right? There's going to be a lot of need for the board to meet even more regularly because of the emergency situation in which the company is operating, because of the environment in a force majeure. Things are going to be changing so rapidly, so constantly, that the board cannot afford to just wait in between, to just wait until the next quarterly meetings. They may need to meet more regularly. So the company secretary needs to, needs to schedule these emergency meetings. But how are you going to do this? You need to first of all check your articles of association. Section 266 of CAMA says that 14 days notice shall be given of board meetings unless the article provides otherwise. So you first need to look at your articles. Will it allow your board to hold those frequent meetings that they need to have? If it's not going to allow it, then you need to amend your articles to allow your board to meet at short notice. If your articles does not allow the board to meet at short notice, then those meetings are not going to be possible, because 266 says that 14 days notice must be given of board meetings. So you want to enable your board to be able to meet regularly. So you need to have that provision in your articles. Also, you need to then, if you look at section 263(1) of CAMA, it just says that the directors may meet to conduct their business and regulate their meeting adjourned as they deem fit. We all know that CAMA was enacted in 1990. When CAMA was enacted in 1990, we didn't have, for example, this medium that we're using to talk. We didn't have Zoom. The basic thing we had was, was just telephone, a phone. Not even GSM was not even there then, so you could not have said, okay, WhatsApp call, So some people argue and say, oh, because section 263(1) says directors may meet and regulate their meetings as they deem fit, therefore they can just go ahead and have virtual meetings. I don't think that is right. At best, we can say CAMA is silent on it. But where the CAMA is silent, then you then need to make provision for it in your article, because we're operating in good, extraordinary times now. You may well ask me, so I mean, in these difficult times, how are we going to get the article amended? That should not be a barrier. The first step to getting the article amendment is for you as the company secretary to advise the board, sir, we need to amend our articles in order to be able to have these virtual meetings or to enable directors to participate in meetings virtually. And so you circulate a written resolution to them. That resolution is basically just recommending to your shareholders that the articles be amended to allow for holding meetings at short notice and for holding board meetings virtually. You do not have to insist that this resolution should be signed in wet ink, because you know fully well that that resolution is not for filing at the CAC, is meant for your minutes book. So the directors can sign it electronically, and they can sign it in counterpart, okay? And you just have to be creative. Some directors may even tell you, look, I don't have capacity to scan documents and send it to you at this time, right? So you can say to the director, sir, for now, it will be okay if you can confirm your approval of this resolution, which I have passed, by email to me. So he sends you an email and he says approved. When you have the time, when things are better, you can then get him to sign that document in wet ink for your records. But for now, in this force majeure situation, he's confirming to you by email that he approves that resolution is sufficient for you to proceed with what you want to do. So in terms of shareholder meetings, like I said, the CAC had issued guidelines for holding AGMs by proxy. So you can arrange for the shareholders to have that AGM by proxy and amend that article. One thing we also did during this pandemic is that we realized that, getting filings done at CAC, was going to be a challenge. One, because the CAC was not working at full capacity. In fact, for 2 months too, the CAC was shut down. When there was total lockdown, it was shut down. It was after the easing of the lockdown in about June that they opened a bit, but they were working at, much reduced capacity. So there were delays. In fact, there were no longer timelines for filing of any sort. So, but we saw then that in the Companies and Allied Matters Act, it says the memorandum and association and the articles is a deed, right? And so the members agreed to be bound by it. And so because you are having these difficult challenges, right, you can ask your shareholders to please, that in view of this force majeure situation that has happened, there are delays, there are attendant challenges. So could they please pass an extra resolution agreeing that these amendments which have been made should take immediate effect while you pursue the filing of the amended MEMAT, the altered MEMAT at the Corporate Affairs Commission. So if they pass that, then you are very close to arranging those virtual meetings that you want your board and board committees to be able to have, so that they can get a control over this force majeure event that has happened, okay? It also helps when you circulate for companies that have just 2 shareholders, 3 shareholders. You do not even need to hold an AGM by proxy. You can circulate the resolution to your shareholders and ask them to sign it in wet ink, make a provision inside the resolution that they can sign the resolution in counterparts, because I've found out that when you have that resolution in any resolution you are giving to the CAC, they will take it. But if you don't have it, they're likely to say, oh,
Please, bring for me, sir.
a challenge for you. But if you include in the resolution that the resolution can be signed in counterpart, then the CAC is likely to take it, and it's in
Papa. It fell. It fell down?
No, this one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because you are in an emergency situation, the force majeure situation, while you are still trying to figure out how to get your company, your board to move to the stage of holding virtual meetings, it will also be helpful, the first meeting of the board, which they may have, if your articles do not allow you to hold meetings at short notice or to hold virtual board meetings, you could suggest that, sir, we can still have a meeting. All the directors will join the call. The board will discuss the matters they want to discuss. And at the end of it, we'll reduce every decision that was taken at the meeting into a written resolution, and all directors will sign off on it. That will kickstart the process for you, rather than just sitting and folding your hands and you are looking, okay? So with the company secretary, who normally has the role of convening meetings, will have to be responsible for convening and facilitating the virtual meetings of the board, the committees, and the management under the direction of the respective chairman or chairperson, or in the case of management, the managing director. It's very instructive to see that the Nigerian Stock Exchange actually issued guidelines for companies to hold virtual meetings for boards and for their committees. And it was really it came out timely, and it was detailed, and it was good, right? So when you are going to schedule your virtual meetings, the company secretary is going to schedule the virtual meetings, you need to consider where each director is. Some directors got stuck in the US, so they have time difference of 5 to 6 to 8 hours between Nigeria and here. Some directors got stuck in the UK. UK is typically 1 hour behind us. Right now, they're on the same time with us. So you need to look at these things. It will be unreasonable, really, to say, oh, let's have this virtual board meeting at 9 a.m. Nigerian time. Your director that is stuck in the US is actually 5 hours behind if he is in New York or Atlanta, which means it's just 4 a.m. for him. So you need to factor that into your scheduling the meeting, the virtual board meeting for everyone. Then, because it's a critical period, a force majeure period, you want to encourage your board to set up a special committee that would dimension the risk of this force majeure situation that they're in, that will keep on working with management to review what management is doing, to monitor the risk measures that have been taken in place, that management has put in place to work effectively within this period. If you, however, have a board risk management committee, or it's lumped with audits, because some companies have audit and risk in one committee, that committee could as well take over this, be assigned that responsibility. Now, the company secretary needs to work closely with this committee. The company secretary needs to make sure that all the documents, all the board papers, all the information which this committee is going to require to do its work are provided speedily and timeously. You literally have to sit on management to make sure that you get these documents ready. And it's not get these documents ready a day or two before the committee meets. They've got to have time to read the board papers, because it's only when the directors are informed that they come to meetings and are able to provide for you to actually contribute meaningfully to the meeting. Then you need to make sure that updates, as the company secretary, that updates are provided regularly between the 3 triangles around you, the committee, the management, and the board. And everybody is getting these updates regularly so that they can take decisions as the things occur. In preparing these meetings, right, for the board, for the committees, the company secretary needs to work on the agenda to make sure that the agenda for the meetings are concise, right? I've learned during this remote working that when you hold board meetings, they tend to be shorter. They need to be focused, actually, because it's very easy for people to get distracted. So you want to make sure, as the company secretary, that your agenda sets out clearly the matters to be discussed, right? And they shouldn't really be lengthy, bulky agenda items, not like have 15 issues on the agenda. And so you get it approved by your chairman or the chairperson of the committee of the board, or if it's your management team by the MD. Then as the company secretary, because you know you are going to be holding these virtual meetings, right? You need to be involved in the decision as to the equipment to be procured for it. You cannot do it alone. This is something you need the IT team to cooperate with you on, and for you also to look at it and make some specifications. For example, you are going to be having participants in the meeting, right? How do you admit participants? How do you, someone who is going to make a presentation, how do you keep him out of the meeting until it is time for him to join the meeting? Then when you set it up, in terms of where the meeting is, making sure that you have the company has proper working, efficient internet connectivity. They have the width, the broadband and the width, and then the equipment by themselves. And so when you then have the board meeting, you set it up working with your IT team. I'm sure those of us who joined the training early heard Mr. Ojiji working with the IC team, trying to set things up and make sure that this MCPE would be executed flawlessly. Also ahead of the meeting, the company secretary needs to confirm the attendance, those who will be attending, those who will be attending in their capacity as directors, those who will be attending in their capacity as presentation papers, and make sure that everybody has the link for the meeting so that they can join the meeting seamlessly. It will be good before the meeting is held if the company secretary can do a test run of the meeting with the IT team. In other words, they want to test the equipment, they want to test the connectivity, and make sure that everything will run seamlessly, even as the meeting goes on. Ahead of the meeting, the company secretary needs to send reminders to the participants, the board members, the committee members, those who have papers to present, reminders of the meeting, reminders of the code or the link for them to join the meeting. I had said before that in terms of the committees, you need to make sure that they get board papers ahead of the meeting, not a day or two before the meeting, but well ahead. We've always emphasized that for most practitioners anyway, that the best system is to have board papers at least 1 week before the meeting so that directors can read through and they can make meaningful contributions at the meeting. Okay, so in conducting the meeting, you may have some people coming to make presentations to the board during the board meeting. So it would be best if the company secretary schedules those external parties to make their presentations early at the board meeting so that they can then leave and go and do something else with their day. And it also leaves the board more room to focus on discussions and what it is they want to do. The company secretary needs to consider how the technology that is to be used, right, can be monitored, can be used, can be deployed effectively to make sure that participants who are going to make presentations do not join the meeting before the time that they are scheduled to join. She also needs to be concerned with the issue of security of the company information that may be passing through. I've heard 1 or 2 people say, oh, I don't like Zoom. I'm not sure it's a secured platform. Some prefer Microsoft Teams for holding their meetings. They feel it's more secured, So those things need to be taken into consideration by the company secretary before the meeting proceeds, right? In order to have a focused meeting, and so that people are not easily distracted, it will be best as the company secretary, if you are the person that is sharing documents, sharing your screen for the participants to be able to focus well on the discussions. It will be distracting if we're in a meeting and each director needs to be moving between board papers and thinking, oh, where is this one? Where can I get this now? Oh, company secretary, did you circulate it? So just to cut off all those small distractions, it will be best if the company secretary is sharing his or her screen at those meetings to keep them focused. And then we have responsibility to write minutes for these meetings. We need to make sure that the minutes that we write during this force majeure period adequately captures the discussions of the board or of the board committees or of management. Any meeting that we go to, we need to make sure that those minutes are properly captured and decisions are properly captured. And so we need to also ensure that the minutes that we take, they will be consistent with any disclosures that we may be required to make in respect of the force majeure situation. It will be helpful for the company secretary during the meeting to have other means of communicating with people. It's possible that some people are using systems that, the internet is not robust enough and they may be cut off, but the company secretary needs to have a means of communicating with them to make sure that they are able to reconnect back to the meeting. As the organizer and as the one sort of coordinating the meeting, the company secretary also needs to pay attention to the chats that are coming up and the questions that are being raised, and where the chairman has missed a participant raising their hand, then the company secretary needs to draw the attention of the chairman to that participant so that he can ask they can ask the question or make the comment that they want to make. So we've talked about meetings and what the company secretary can do under that situation. So let's look at stakeholders. The stakeholders of the company are the shareholders. The shareholders are customers, are regulators, the CAC, if it's a public company, the SEC, NSC, our suppliers, the community in which we live. And so the company secretary has to, as a first step, monitor the environment at that particular period to see whether, whether there are issues or releases from regulatory agencies that they need to share with the directors to keep the directors abreast of developments within that period. For example, when we started in March, and there were all the extensions by the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? So it would have behooved the company secretary to have informed the board that, sir, SEC has just extended the deadline for the submission of our Q1 report by 60 days. So that report will be due by end of June. Is information which they would have found very, 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 very useful. All those decisions, all those orders that were also given by the federal government, and all the advice about protection from the COVID-19 pandemic itself, there were things that the company secretary should have shared with the directors to keep them abreast of developments in the environment. And then it would also be helpful if, you know, the company secretary had pointed out to the directors that our shareholders will be wondering, what is happening with the company? How is the company coping under this difficult environment, this force majeure period that we're in, that everything is at a standstill? And so the company secretary should have talked to the board, should have advised the board, or would advise the board that we need to communicate with our shareholders and let them know that we are not totally shut down. We are trying as much as possible to keep the business going. We may have to look for alternative sources of getting raw materials. These are the challenges that we are experiencing. But nevertheless, we believe that we will weather this period, and we will still come out successful and will survive this period. You know, it's just so that the shareholders are not left they're not left in the dark, not knowing what is happening to their company, what is happening to their investments. So it's more than the normal communication of, oh, we're just doing an AGM. You know, most companies, once we've done the AGM, most of us rarely bother to communicate with our shareholders. But in the period of a force majeure, we need to communicate more. So the company secretary is responsible for that and would work with the board and the chairman and the communication strategy team of the company to work out the relevant information that can be communicated to shareholders at that time. Then, of course, internally, the company secretary needs to share, you know, deadlines, compliance deadlines and requirements with the relevant departments within the company. During this last force majeure event that we had, the pandemic, for example, the Federal Inland Revenue Service extended the deadline for filing companies' income tax return from June 30 to July 31. And even as we speak, they have extended that deadline for another 2 weeks, right? So that's information that the company secretary needs to relate, one, to the board, two, to the relevant departments who will be filing your tax return, or the people preparing your financial statements, if they have not yet completed it, that they have another 2 weeks within which to round up and file the necessary return. Under the direction of the chairman, the company secretary should ensure that there is good information flow within the board and the committees and between senior management and the non-executive directors. Just constantly needs to be on his or her toes and make sure that everybody is getting the information that they're supposed to get in a timely manner. Because I said you have various stakeholders, so of course your customers are also your stakeholders. You need to let the customers know, work with your marketing team to come out with a release to customers, telling them whether you are going to have delays, whether some products are going to be in short supply, you know, just so you manage people's expectations, so to speak, because many customers may be relying on the company to provide them with one raw material, one supply or the other. So it's really just to manage all these relationships and people's expectations, and the company secretary has a role to play in that process. In terms of regulatory disclosures, for public listed entities, where there are material changes in your business, you need to make that disclosure to the Nigerian Stock Exchange and other regulators under the supervision of the board. The NSE needs to be kept abreast of what is happening in your company, and so you need to make sure that all those disclosures you are supposed to make, you make them. Some on the portal, some in communications, in emails to them, you know, and anything that is likely to affect the profitability or the going concern ability of the company needs to be disclosed at that point. The company secretary also needs to work with the legal team and under the supervision of the board, disclosures and communication about current and potential impact of the force majeure situation on the business and on the operation of the company, so that these releases, these disclosures are properly planned and they are well worded to ensure that they are in compliance with applicable rules and regulations. As the company secretary, you need to have a relationship with your regulators more so during this period. Normally you have it. A good company secretary has it. It's like you're leveraging on your relationships with whoever is in charge of your affairs at Nigerian Stock Exchange. So in the force majeure period, the company secretary needs to be in constant touch with the regulators. You need to check their websites for new guidelines, new rules, new things that affect you, and you need to bring them to the attention of your board. And just have your relationship manager one call away, that you can literally just call him and ask for information or ask for guidance on any matter that you are not sure about. In terms of compliance, the company secretary should ensure that relevant guidelines or directives that are issued by the regulators or the government in response to the force majeure situation are duly complied with. We all saw during the lockdown that various rules were put in place. Eventually, it was total lockdown. Nobody should go out. Then later it was, some businesses can open. They can open from 9, they close by 3. There should be there were advices that in workplaces, you prominently display signs that will guide people in coping with the sort of situation in which we were now. And so the company secretary also has a role to play to make sure that those things are displayed. Social distancing is maintained even in the office place, compliance. And then your reporting to your regulatory authorities as and when you are supposed to return to. You are supposed to report your filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Despite the force majeure, these things have not been cancelled. They have just been, the deadlines for submission have just been extended. So the company secretary needs to make sure that they're in compliance and they do all those things as they are supposed to do them promptly without incurring penalties for their companies. So as a company secretary, I would encourage you that at this time, in a force majeure period, don't panic. Do not panic. Keep calm, be proactive, constantly think about, try to envisage what is happening. Try to look into, this time next week, what are we going to be, without worrying unnecessarily about it, right? It's just being proactive, trying to think ahead of where the company could go to and what could be the needs of the company in the immediate short term. So that if you as a company secretary needs to do anything towards achieving it at that time, you will do it. Then take the force majeure as a challenging period, right? And make up your mind that you are going to win, to come out successful at the end of it. You're going to smile, then be involved. Don't think, this is just my own little bit that I'm going to do. Try and coordinate everybody, coordinate the board, coordinate the committees, coordinate management, even within management. Be more or less be like the center force, right? And then try and look at issues one at a time. Don't pile everything together and you are running here and there, trying to solve this, trying to solve A, trying to solve B, trying to solve C. Just take it one step at a time. It's also helpful if you can reach out to colleagues at this time, especially colleagues who are working in similar industries, as in a similar industry as you are, to find out how they are coping, how they are solving this issue which you have. And at the same time, as you are reaching out, you are sharing experiences with them as to how you have resolved problems and how you have done them. And then you need to use this period of the force majeure while it's happening to prepare for the next one. We don't know when the next one will be, but there may be another challenge, another one that will just literally bring the world to a standstill. And then as the company secretary, you've got to have a positive mindset and believe that your organization will come through this. It is just a temporary situation. It is not here to stay. And so the focus, the long-term objective is to make sure that when all this is over, your organization is still standing. Your board is still as solid as ever. In fact, they have grown stronger in their decision making and in what they're doing. I do believe that after this pandemic, boards are going to continue to meet virtually. I do not think that most boards will go back to having physical meetings, or if they will have physical meetings, it may be hybrid meetings. But I think these virtual meetings have come to stay for us. And so the company secretary has to be constantly thinking of how to improve these virtual board meetings, even after the force majeure period has gone through. Also bear in mind that there is nothing that never comes to an end. It will end one day. This pandemic will pass. And by the grace of God, we will all still be standing when it passes and we'll be there. This one too will come to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sehiwere, for that wonderful and insightful presentation. I believe our participants have taken something away from all that you have said in this presentation. And I know that they have found it to be very, very interesting. Now, we want to thank you very much for that. Now, we want to look at the questions that we have with us here. Okay, we have a question here from one of the participants. Now, she said, that's Tubechi Egbo is asking, she says, I have a question for the lecturer. Can she give us a compelling reason, or can she give us compelling reasons why it is necessary to amend the articles to address virtual meetings as section 263, subsection 1 of CAMA permits directors to conduct their meetings as they deem fit. And then she goes on to add that my view is that this clause is wide enough to cover the holding of virtual meetings by the board. So she would like you to answer the question, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually believe I answered the question, even in the course of my presentation. But like I said, section 263 subsection 1 just says the directors may regulate their meetings and adjourn as they deem fit. It does not make provision for virtual meetings. That speaks to the frequency of your holding your meetings. And where you want to hold your meetings. I don't believe it captures virtual meeting, because if you remember, you are looking at a legislation that was enacted in 1990. And in 1990, we did not have virtual meetings. The intention of the CAMA then was for people to meet physically, not to hold virtual meetings. We didn't have all these gadgets that we have then. And as I said during my presentation, at the best, you would say the CAMA is silent on virtual meetings. That's the best you can say. So if the CAMA is silent on virtual meetings, then you need to put it into your articles that you can hold those virtual meetings. There is nothing that I have seen in the last 3 months that has changed my mind on this position. In fact, if you then look at the NSC guidelines for holding virtual and board meetings, you will see that even the NSC recognized it there, that our law is silent on holding virtual meetings. It will be best if you amend your articles. But NSC was even lenient and said, well, it could be your board charter, it could be your committee charters that you want to amend. But I think it's just best you amend your articles to allow you to do it. Because the law, when it was enacted, did not contemplate holding of virtual meetings. It didn't. All the intention is like annual general meeting. Some people tell you, oh, but I can hold annual general meeting virtually. No, you cannot. If you could, CAMA would not have said any shareholder who is unable to attend should appoint a proxy. So that is the reason why I am recommending that you amend your articles to allow you to hold virtual board meetings. I do not think section 2631 is sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma, for the response to that question. I believe you have answered the question very well, and the person who asked that question must be satisfied now with your response. Just want to, now we are in the question and answer section. Okay, I can't see any other question in the chat room, but I would just want to know, is there any of our participants who has any question or contribution to make at this point in time? You can please raise your hand. You can just using the reaction icon. If you have any question, please raise your hand. If you want to make any contribution, any question, any contribution, observation?
Okay. I can see Obioma raised hand. Who, Mr. Gigi?
Obioma, Obioma, let me see, then. Let me see. Obioma raising her hand. Okay. Yeah, that's Obioma. Okay. Okay, we're trying to mute her now so she can ask her question.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. Okay.
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yes.
Good morning.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Facilitator. That was so beautiful. As a company secretary, I've always wondered, and I'm sure a lot of us, we're worried about how to deal with our meetings in this peculiar situation that we've all found ourselves. And I want to say a very big thank you for that clarity. You broke it down so simply and all that, and then you also assured us that we shouldn't panic, that these two will pass. And even when it does pass, I think there will still be some some elements of virtual meetings will still be there because if for nothing, for the convenience too, it's also quite convenient. But in that convenience, we too must not relax in our duties as company secretaries. I just want to say a very big thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other question, contribution, observation?
I see a question from someone in the chat that says, can AGM be held virtual when the article is amended? To be candid, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that. I have seen one or two companies try to amend their articles to allow them to hold AGM virtually. Unfortunately, I do not know whether they have been able to file those amendments successfully at the CAC. I do know that some companies that wrote to the CAC and asked for permission to hold their AGM virtually, the CAC either responded and said noted, which is not an approval, or they actually said, oh, our laws do not permit the holding of virtual AGMs. So I cannot say for sure now that you'll be able to hold your AGM virtually. But if you are a limited liability company, right? Now more so when they have lifted number of people to attend a public gathering to 50, I do not see why you want to hold a virtual AGM. Make use of the guidelines that was issued by the CAC on regulation of companies holding AGMs by proxy, and arrange for your meeting to be held in a room that is large enough. For most companies, you won't even have up to 20 participants. Your directors, your company secretary, your auditor, you won't be up to 20. Just make sure that everybody can sit in a way that can give you social distance. So I cannot definitely tell you now that they will allow AGMs to be held virtually, at least until the CAMA is amended. Until the CAMA is amended. That was not the intention with CAMA.
Okay, thank you very much, ma, for that response. We have, okay, before we take Michael, there's another question in the chat box. Is saying, from Folashade Taiwo is asking, is it not better to have a provision in the MEMAT for virtual meeting because of its convenience?
Okay, there is nothing stopping you from having a provision in your MEMAT well, if it's a board meeting, maybe I should make that clear. There is no reason why you cannot have that provision in your MEMAT for convenience. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, I think we should take Michael Umogun. He's raising his hand. Michael.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, rather an observation and a note of gratitude. Ma'am, your presentation is highly insightful, very practical, not book or text or read. All our colleagues on this chat have been doing so, will have benefited greatly. We want to thank you again for making it so lively and so interesting. That's my brief observation. Thank you a lot, ma'am. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a question from Obaro Rora Ogo, and she's asking, does the waiver of statutory notice period address the issue of emergency board meetings without amending the articles?
Unfortunately, no, it does not. And the reason for my saying no is this. If you look into section 266 subsection 2 of CAMA, that says that 14 days notice must be given for board meetings unless your articles provide otherwise. Unless your articles provide otherwise. Therefore, if you are going to have a board meeting and there is no provision in your articles for holding the meeting at short notice, right? Then you cannot even have an emergency board meeting. That's my view, you cannot. But if you put in your articles that board meetings may be held at shorter notice than 14 days, provided all the directors agree to waive their right to statutory notice, then you can go ahead. That's the only amendment you need in your articles. So it's your articles which give you the leeway in line with section 266 of section 1 to have a board meeting at short notice, which is what an emergency meeting would be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. We have Bernard Sean raising his or her hand to maybe ask a question. So please, Bernard, please go ahead with your question.
All right, thank you very much. So, just like the people spoke before me, man, I would like to appreciate you for the industry put into the presentation. It was awesome and highly practical. So my question is not really with regards to what was discussed, but I would like to draw on your wealth of experience. So as a company secretary or as a lawyer that represents companies or works with companies that have pending transactions before the pandemic set in, transactions that have, for transactions, we have transaction deadlines. So now that the pandemic set in and it has become difficult to a large extent to meet up with the deadlines. For example, if as a company secretary or as a lawyer, I am handling due diligence for some of the transactions for the companies in the course of the transactions. And now due to the lockdown and for example, at the CAC now before the pandemic, you could get your search report, you could do your search and get whatever information you need on a company within 2-3 days. But now due to the pandemic, you apply for a search and until after a month's time, the search report is not out. And it's the same with some of the other regulatory agencies. So, what would you advise in such a situation as this? That is my question.
Well,
how would you go about it?
Well, the issue is that you need to then go back to your clients that you are working for on this matter. It's communication, right? It's a case of communication. You need to go back to them and say, this has happened. These are the challenges with CAC. CAC is not working at full capacity. In fact, CAC has changed the modalities for conducting searches. They do not even allow lawyers access to the files again. You need to tell the CAC what you want. CAC will conduct the search on your behalf and give you a search report. That these are the challenges, these are the deadlines have to shift, and this is why the deadlines have to shift, and basically making them understand the situation you are in now. It's beyond your control. So you are trying to manage the expectation of your clients. I guess that is the summary of it, to manage the expectation of your clients. At the same time, right, you're also going to try to leverage on relationships that you have built in this regulatory agencies. At the CAC, I expect you as a company secretary to have built some relationships over the years with some people at the CAC that if you call them, they will be able to help you. But it's likely to manage expectations. You understand what I'm saying? I have someone in my office, right, that liaises with CAC very often. And to my shock, even my own surprise, she was actually able to get an incorporation done within 3 days. I had to open my mouth and say, wow, you understand? So it's managing your clients' expectations as well as trying to leverage on relationships you have built with regulatory authorities during this period. That's the best advice I can give you. So that even though you have managed the expectation of your clients, you have said, oh, we may not be able to get this done in three weeks, but because you are leveraging on your relationships, right, you could bring it in under 1 week. And your clients will be pleasantly surprised that, you mean you actually achieved this? Thank you. They'll be thanking you. So that's the best advice I can give you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma, for that response. Rukewe Falana is saying that CAC will not approve that virtual meeting be included in the MEMAT. That's her own point of view or her own position on the matter. I don't know if you have anything to say, ma.
Yes, I do have. Like I said, I've seen some companies trying to alter their MEMAT to hold virtual meetings, but I do not know whether they were able to successfully file that altered MEMAT at the CAC. But I do know that some companies that have asked CAC whether they could have virtual meetings, CAC either answered noted, they said noted. Noted is not an approval, or the CAC would say outrightly that our laws do not contemplate AGMs being held virtually. So I am not disagreeing with her position. I am still along the same line that she is, that I do not think it's possible unless they amend our KAMA. But I've seen companies try to do it. I don't know whether they've been successful in doing it.